For the past few months, things in the world of WordPress have been a hot mess. If you missed the drama, the founder of WordPress recently picked a fight with WP Engine, one of the biggest WordPress hosting companies in the world. Instead of waiting to resolve this conflict in court, Matt Mullenweg took what he self-described as the nuclear option, doing everything in his power to affect WordPress sites hosted on WP Engine. I already did a video explaining the initial reasons behind the conflict and my speculation on what I think might happen, but a lot has developed between October and now. Since that video, Matt Mullenweg has done some crazy stuff. Instead of just removing the Advanced Custom Fields plugin from WordPress.org, which is owned and maintained by WP Engine, he hijacked the listing, creating a fork of Advanced Custom Fields called Secure Custom Fields, and hosting it on the same plugin listing as ACF. Now look, whether you agree with it or not, Matt Mullenweg is within his right to fork ACF because it is an open source project. But last I checked, forking an open source project doesn't involve hijacking the repository listing and renaming it. This was a full-on supply chain attack. Anyone with ACF installed suddenly received updates for SCF, and all the reviews on the ACF listing? Yep, those carried right over to SCF. A day after I released my last video, WP Engine filed a 62-page complaint with the California court to demand a trial to resolve the conflict. Yet, Mullenweg refused to stop there. He then added a mandatory checkbox to the login page of WordPress.org, forcing users to confirm that they were not affiliated with WP Engine in any way, financially or otherwise. This vague statement iced a lot of people out of accessing WordPress.org. On one hand, you could interpret this to mean just WP Engine stakeholders, but on the other hand, one could argue that this includes WP Engine employees, affiliates, and even customers. There's always been some kind of drama in the WordPress community, and I'll admit that I haven't been deeply involved in the community for that long, but I've never seen a mass exodus like the one that followed these actions. Some of the top talent contributing to WordPress left. Developers began pulling their plugins and themes from WordPress.org, and Josepha, the executive director of the WordPress product, resigned from Automatic after nearly 10 years of employment. Matt Mullenweg escalated things quickly after his initial presentation at WordCamp US. At first, many users were on his side. He expressed his opinion that WP Engine wasn't contributing enough to WordPress and simply asked customers to consider their options when their plan came up for renewal. But everything Matt has done since that point makes WP Engine employees, affiliates, and customers the enemy. That's evident with the login checkbox on WordPress.org. And this makes no sense because the WordPress.org website outlines 4 core freedoms. The freedom to run the program for any purpose, the freedom to study how the program works and change it to make it do what you wish, the freedom to redistribute, and the freedom to distribute your modified versions to others. So you're free to run the program for any purpose, yet you're not free to log into WordPress.org just because you're a WP Engine employee? When this was brought up, Matt Mullenweg made it very clear that he personally controls and operates WordPress.org, and that the WordPress software itself remains free and open source to everyone, accessible via GitHub. Well, first of all, the 4 core freedoms of WordPress are listed on WordPress.org, the very website that Matt claims ownership of, so I don't think he actually believes in these freedoms. Second, what on earth does the WordPress Foundation even do? I always assumed that the WordPress Foundation owned and controlled WordPress.org. The WordPress Foundation website says that the foundation will be responsible for protecting the WordPress, WordCamp, and related trademarks. On the trademark page, it outlines that there are acceptable ways that you can use the WordPress trademark in non-commercial scenarios, but you cannot use WordPress or WordCamp as part of a domain name. Okay, makes sense to me. Except for the fact that the WordPress Foundation doesn't own or operate WordPress.org. Matt Mullenweg does. And just because he's Matt Mullenweg doesn't mean he gets special access to the trademark. Matt Mullenweg does not own the WordPress trademark. The WordPress Foundation does. It seems that Matt Mullenweg is in direct violation of the WordPress trademark. And the more you go down this path, the more you realize that WordPress is basically controlled by Matt Mullenweg. Or is it? Last week, a California judge ordered Matt Mullenweg and Automatic to stop interfering with WP Engine's business, at least until this lawsuit is settled. As a result, Mullenweg was forced to roll back everything. WP Engine once again has access to WordPress.org, ACF has been restored to the plugin repository, and the mandatory login checkbox on WordPress.org was changed from the WP Engine disclosure to forcing users to agree that pineapple is delicious on pizza. Yes, it's literally a required checkbox. Really, Matt? Why? I mean, yeah, pineapple is delicious on pizza, but it shouldn't be required. Now, the drama is far from over, because the injunction order is only valid until there's an official outcome in the case. The case is currently scheduled to begin in March, and I'm not a lawyer, but I'm guessing it will probably take months to years to play out. With that being said, judges generally grant injunction orders only when they genuinely believe there is legal precedent to do so. By the judge granting WP Engine's injunction request, it was an acknowledgement that Matt Mullenweg may not be able to legally do whatever he feels like with his so-called personal website. After all, WordPress powers over 43% of the entire internet, including sites as prestigious as whitehouse.gov. So it's a bit concerning that one person is pulling these strings and manipulating who is and isn't able to access the accompanying services. Now, before the actually warriors storm the comments, yes, it is technically correct that WordPress.org is not necessary at all to run the WordPress software. WordPress.org hosts the official plugin repository, theme repository, and support forum for the WordPress project. However, WordPress core does not contain a way for users to easily switch to an alternate repository. In other words, API calls back to WordPress.org are baked into the software. So while Mullenweg makes the argument that he can flip the switch and cut off access to anyone he wants, this feels incredibly unfair when there are no user-friendly ways to switch to alternative sources, especially given the massive market share of WordPress. Should web hosts pay a fee to access WordPress.org's resources? Maybe. I think that's a legitimately fair discussion to have, since running servers is expensive. It is true that Matt Mullenweg has personally been footing the bill for WordPress.org since its inception. But all of this escalated way too quickly. If Matt Mullenweg wanted companies to start chipping into the WordPress.org server bill, he could have brought this up slowly, launching a gradual campaign over the span of a year or two, and making it overwhelmingly clear to the big players that if they didn't start contributing by the deadline, they would lose their access to WordPress.org's resources. But instead, we went from the general public having no idea that Matt Mullenweg and WP Engine were having disagreements, to all WP Engine customers being discriminated against and eradicated from the WordPress community in a matter of weeks. Regardless of your views on WP Engine, I think we can all agree that the WordPress Foundation and WordPress.org need serious leadership reform. I hope the outcome of this legal battle leads to permanent safeguards protecting against this type of behavior, but I'm afraid WordPress has gone down a path that will make the experience worse for everyone. What Matt Mullenweg signaled, whether intentional or not, is that WordPress.org is no longer a reliable, trustworthy source to lean on to host plugins, themes, and download WordPress updates. In response to this, we're sure to see alternative repositories created, and it's only a matter of time until we have flavors of WordPress, in the same way we have Linux distros. While there's nothing inherently wrong with this, and it goes with the spirit of most open source projects, it's going to introduce new security challenges. There will no longer be one source of truth. If these alternative repositories are mirrors of WordPress.org, how up to date will they really be? If a developer pushes a 0-day patch to their plugin on WordPress.org, how long until someone using an alternative repository receives the update? Matt Mullenweg had the opportunity to make his case to the WordPress community and gracefully allow the community to see his side of the story, but instead he alienated the very community he wanted to protect. So where do we go from here? What does this drama mean for WordPress in the short and long term? In the short term, at least while the injunction is in place, it seems we get to enjoy the old status quo, WordPress as it once was. But in the long term, I'm concerned that WordPress is going to get even more fragmented and less secure than it already is, potentially causing a downward spiral in usage. In other words, I fear that we're going to see the slow, painful death of WordPress over many years. I don't want to be dramatic. WordPress is going to be around for a very long time. It powers nearly half of the entire internet. I can't stress that enough. But technology is ever changing. ever improving, and we adapt and move on to newer, better software over time. And unfortunately for WordPress, I don't see it standing the test of time unless we see significant changes in leadership. However, I also acknowledge that there aren't great open source alternatives yet. Don't get me wrong, there are alternatives. Modern no-code website builders like Webflow and Wix Studio give WordPress a serious run for its money. But if you like the mission of open source and want to be able to take your website with you anywhere, WordPress is still the platform to use. If you actively use WordPress, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Will you continue to use WordPress without hesitation, or are you keeping an eye out for the next alternative? Personally, I'm going to keep using WordPress for as long as it makes sense. I think it's got a while longer to shine, as creating a genuinely competitive alternative won't be quick or easy. But in 5, 10, or 20 years from now, WordPress may very well lose its majority market share. And if it can get better leadership, maybe it can stay on top. If you want to try a WordPress alternative, I recently compared Webflow, Wix Studio, and Framer. You can check out that video here.